All right, I mentioned last time that we were going to make a HUD or a heads-up display or a UI for our game. So um, the new UI, and I should no longer really be calling it new. It was new in Unity 5. Uh, Instead, it's the UI. Um, the immediate mode GUI that I mentioned in the last lecture is primarily used with editor scripts. It's still there, but it's kind of kludgy and nowhere near as much fun as the new UI, the UI. Here's manual and a nice tutorial at Unity Learn for looking at this. So the new the UI, is on one hand really powerful and much easier to use than the immediate mode. But it is really a TMO, too many options. So becoming proficient can take some time and study. We'll look at three specific tools when we get back to our game. We'll have buttons that we'll use to select things. We'll have a slider that will reflect our health and points, and probably a text area that'll have the value of the health and points that we've got. I can show you an example here, the sampler. The sampler that has a whole bunch of sample UI elements, things like odd-shaped buttons with various fancy text on it, toggles, uh, pull-down menus, sliders you can interact with, uh, text that you can enter, and documentation that you can have in a scrollable uh, window. All these are elements that we can have in the UI. In order to access these elements, any script that we're going to use has to have the Unity Engine.UI added to our Unity Engine and system collections. The basis of the new UI, of the UI, is the canvas. So um, uh, if you create a UI element, so for instance, here in one of these scenes, uh, I've already got a canvas. No, that's not what I want. No, it's empty. Here I've got a canvas with a panel, and inside that is a button, and the button itself has a text element inside it. But if I were to delete that and create a button, it immediately adds a canvas, and the button is a child of that canvas. The canvas is the basis of this whole thing, and the canvas occupies the whole screen. You can have more than one canvas in a scene with different children for different elements that you're trying to deal with. And the canvas itself has a number of options. Um, the one of these is what screen, where we're going to put it. The most commonly used one is the overlay. And in this case, the canvas just completely covers the screen of our game view. Over here in the over here in the 2D somehow. Over here in the game view, the canvas is a big panel, kind of flat, There's my plane down here, 5 by 1 by 5. That's a fairly big plane. So this element covers the entire screen in overlay mode. Here's the screen space overlay. Um, Here's an example that I've already got set up. So I have here a canvas. The canvas covers the whole screen. Inside that is a panel. The panel, select the rack. The panel is resizable. And inside the panel is a slider and a button. And this shows on top of everything. It's kind of in front of the window that we're looking through into our world. The other option is that the screen space can be in front of a camera. And I'll show you an example of that. Here is a canvas that is in front of a camera. Now with this, you have to select what camera you want it to be in front of. I have two cameras here. I have a second camera, and if I selected that camera, where'd it go? Oops. If I selected that camera, it moves the button down to the overhead view camera. Put that back. So to emphasize that this is something that's being held in front of the camera, if I walk up here, I can see that my UI element penetrates the objects in the world. This canvas, this panel, is out in front of the camera some distance. Why you'd want to do this, I'm not really clear. I prefer the overlay mode because you don't end up running into objects with your UI. The other one that is kind of cool is the world space. We can put the UI, the canvas, on an object. So here's this cube, and I've actually physically placed the canvas on this object. And its render mode for the canvas this time is world space. And so it's now at a fixed position in the world. And now when I play here, I have this panel on which I have buttons that I can press and sliders that I can slide with the mouse. Incidentally, the mouse always disappears. Escape brings it back, and it disappears. There is a way to turn it on so that your cursor is always visible. Another quick scene with this is with the Ethan character. So now I have Ethan running up to some object that has buttons that he has to push and sliders that he has to set in order to accomplish some task in the world. Most of what I'll show you will be an overlay, where the elements are in front of the world, but camera allows a canvas to be some depth from a specified camera, and world allows the canvas to be at a fixed location in the world. Sometimes one puts a health meter on an enemy character so that it shows up above his head, or in some way the UI element is attached to a specific object. So I went through creating a button. I did a game object UI button. This created a canvas with a button child. The canvas covered the entire visible screen, but in the scene view was that flat plane that was facing in the negative Z direction. Our UI elements have these rects. This is a rect up here. Rects are kind of like fancy transforms, the transforms that give you position, uh, rotation, and scale. Well, rects give you position X, Y, and Z, width and height. That's what makes it a rect. It has various anchors. We'll talk about them in a bit. You can rotate it and scale it. The canvas is grayed out because it covers the entire screen. So whatever your game is, and as we change the game view, the rects over here change automatically so that it covers it. If you had a different aspect ratio, this would automatically adjust to that. I like building things inside panels. So I usually have a panel that's inside the canvas, and this panel now has a rect that I can do things with. Uh, I can select and change this panel. I can change its height and width, and notice that's changing over here in the width and height of my rect. And I can change its position. Uh, I can change its position, and my position X and position Y all move around. Now, the thing that's kind of confusing, let me undo that, are the anchors. The anchors are these little triangles here. Let me select my panel. And somewhere here are the anchors. Oh, there they are in the center. You can't see them because of that. Can't really see them, but here in the panel, these are the anchors. And you can move them around. You can change the anchors. And what these do is change how the object scales for different aspect ratio or different size screens. And this is where it gets tricky because there's so many different choices here. The easiest way to deal with it is to use these presets. What I've done here is I've selected the center, and this puts the little anchors in the center of my canvas, and that means that this object, this panel, is going to maintain exactly the same width and height and position regardless of how big my screen is. It's always going to be the same size, but it will always be in the center of the screen, but it will not scale. And this lets you kind of get things working. You can get your button positioned where you want it to be. It has anchors as well that it has to deal with, but you can get these things set up, and then the panel becomes kind of fixed. Now the other choices here with the presets, I could pick this one that puts the anchors up here at the upper corner. And you might have noticed when I did that these numbers all changed. And that's because these anchors, these positions are all relative to the anchors. Again, this is what makes this such a nightmare. And if I take my panel now and push it up here so that it's near that corner, and I play, I'm going to maximize on play, this stays exactly the same size, and it stays in the same position relative to that corner. Uh, uh, so it's going to be the same size and position relative to those things that are close together. Another choice is to have these things stretch. So here I'm going to stretch it across the top. I'll pick this option. Now you see the anchors are separated here. So this now means that this thing is going to scale so that it has the same spacing, relative spacing across the screen. Uh, uh, and so quickly playing this, you'll see that the thing spans across the screen. Play. You'll see that the thing expands across the screen. It now fills out to those anchors. Uh, Generally, I like the ones that fix it, that put uh, the little anchors in a particular spot. Let me put that down so that it's right at the center. Right at the center is at 0, 0. But of course, notice if I switch this to this, now those numbers are 244 and minus 208. So positions have changed relative to the anchors. Okay. Um, the um, so the rect is a position x, y, and z, which is usually 0, as well as a width and a height, and then these anchors, potential rotation and scale. Um, Anchors are a TMO, too many options, and the way to deal with the TMO is to try them out, TTO, all four together, either at the center or one of the corners, gives reasonably predictable results. The item doesn't scale, and its relative spacing stays the same. So try that out. As I mentioned, I like using a panel and making my elements children of the panel, which is a child of the canvas, because then once you get everything laid out in the panel, you can move it around, and the spacing of stuff inside that panel will not change. There's also something that you can apply to the panel, vertical, horizontal, or grid layout groups. And I believe uh, the vertical layout group uh, uh, will lay things out vertically. The horizontal will distribute them horizontally. And the grid layout lets you make kind of a checkerboard of objects on your screen. And this is done by specifying it within the panel and pulling down the component layout group and picking horizontal, vertical, or grid layout group. The one item here, it's not going to do anything. Uh, well, it did do something. It put it up in the corner. If I specify width and height, this will center it. And notice it fills now the screen. If I add another button, now I have 2 buttons. If I add another button, now I have 3 buttons. And with this uh, layout group, I can specify that I want, say, 10 pixels to the left, 10 to the right, 10 on the top, 10 on the bottom, and I want them to be 10 apart. And so it automatically lays things out, does a very nice job of it very quickly. All of the anchors are set automatically for you, so you don't have to fiddle with anything. It's a great, great tool. So, um, so I'm going to stop right there. I'll come back and I'll start writing our first script. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to end the recording, and I'll see you in class. Stop recording. Bye.